Hey everyone, Fina here from Fina Reads, today with a book review, or rather a series review or duology review, however you're going to see it. It's two books that I'm going to talk about that are part of a series, and that's the Shadow Histories series. Book one of that is A Declaration of the Rights of Magician, and book two is A Radical Act of Free Magic. I don't even know anymore exactly how I found out about the Declaration of the Rights of Magicians. It was definitely a cover buy, and I think it was a random recommendation on Amazon where I just saw the cover and was like, that sounds interesting. And then the premise sounded really interesting, so I decided to buy it and read it. And I'm so glad I did. It is such an amazing duology. But let me tell you about it. All of this spoiler free, of course. I want you to read the book. And I want to make sure that you enjoy it as much as I did by getting into it as blindly as possible. But just so you know what you're getting into, the Shadow's History is a retelling of the French Revolution, the Napoleonic Wars. That's what it's advertised as. But there is a lot more to it. For example, it also is about the Haiti slave uprising, or back then it was Saint Domingue. I'm probably not pronouncing this right. But that slave uprising and how all of these things fit together. And it's not just a historical retelling of that time, but it adds magic into the system. So it's kind of a historical urban fantasy, if you will. I don't know if that's a real genre or if there's a different word for that. But at a super high level, that's what the story is about. From a historical perspective, it is really accurate. I mean, as much as I can tell, and as much as from the little that I researched and from the little that I know about that time frame. But even the characters are actual historical figures. Like you have Prime Minister Pitt and his friend Wilberforce. You have Napoleon and Josephine, of course, Napoleonic Wars, right? You need those. You have Toussaint, who was the general who led the Haiti slave uprising. You have Robespierre, who led the French Revolution, or who started and was a very important figure during the French Revolution. So it is rather accurate in that sense. Book one is more focused on the French Revolution, and book two then moves into the Napoleonic Wars. The magic system is actually, it's simple yet interesting. Not every person in this world has magical abilities. There are normal people without magical abilities, muggles. Then there are magicians. And then you have magicians with the aristocrats, and you have magician commoners. Magician commoners are tested at birth for magical abilities, and if they have them, they have to wear a silver bracelet for the rest of their life, and they are not allowed to use magic. Aristocrats, though, they can do that unless it's illegal magic, like blood magic. Like with any general abilities, magic in this world can be very strong. You can have just weak magical abilities. And one thing that is actually really interesting is that even though everybody is tested at birth, some people have latent magical skills that only develop when they are teens, when it is too late to be tested. All of this is regulated by the Knight Templars. They are looking into abuse of magic or illegal use of magic by commoners, and that's kind of the world that is set in. So the French Revolution that happens in book one is based on commoners not being able to use their magic, but they want to have the right to use it. And that's really the premise of this book and of the series, and that's how everything starts. Book one, well, book two too, but book one even more so, is really slow paced though. So while it is about the French Revolution and that time and the Haiti slave uprising, the focus of the book is the political dialogue. What you're getting is a really slow-paced story full of dialogue between the different politicians, between the different political parties in France and in Britain. And you get a lot of political conversations between friends. You get a lot of deep dive into how friends that are also part of the same political party, or sometimes even of different political parties, how they work together and how their friendship develops. So it's a really interesting study of how people in political environments work together, live together, and how they think about the things that they're going after. Book 1 is really dialogue heavy. There's not much character development because the characters are known, although you see a little bit about how like the Prime Minister grows in his time of being in office and how he stands for his beliefs, and his friend Wilberforce, how he makes sure that the Prime Minister follows his principles and all those kind of things. So it's a really interesting friendship and political dynamic in both books. And book 1, again, really is the focus on the dialogue, on the political development of the French Revolution, and in getting to know the magic system and a little bit the people that are part of the entire story. Book 2 then definitely picks up in pace. I wouldn't call it fast-paced still compared to other fantasy books that I've read, but it's definitely much faster paced than book 1. We're getting a better glimpse into the war, so some warnings on that. While it is not very graphical, it deals with the negative impacts of war and how someone deals with, you know, going into war and killing people. Which is something, by the way, that I really enjoyed about H.G. Parry's writing, is the way she writes about how people deal with the devastation of war. Incredible. Like, there's one scene in book 2 where she describes how someone fears of their life while in the middle of war, and that scene broke me completely. I mean, such a good scene. Such a great way of describing this. It's not easy to talk about that particular piece, and she did an amazing job doing that. Book 2 also then has finally some aspects of the vampires that that were promised for book 1. I read a couple of reviews for book 1 after I was reading it, and actually the summary too of the book, which was talking about vampires being part of the story, and book 1 really doesn't have much of it, which some of the reviews mentioned as a negative, but book 2 definitely explains more what the vampires have to do with everything. Really interesting. I really love the variety of the magic system with the use of magic and the different magical races, magical cultures, I don't know, that, you know, she includes in the story, and it has a really satisfying conclusion, I find. So definitely a great series to read, even if you're usually someone who loves fast-paced, action-packed books, like I am someone like this. I really enjoyed the 2 books, and they are definitely high up on my fantasy favorite list going forward. So this series definitely falls into top books that I've read in this year so far. Not topping Project Hail Mary quite yet, but very close, very exciting, very emotional, especially book 2, and such a great writing that just kept you engaged and kept you sucked into the book. So I highly recommend it, and it's just 2 books. Don't we need more shorter series in the fantasy realm? Also, I think this is a great series if you're not that interested in historical events, to get you pulled into that. I think it's actually a very interesting way of getting people excited about historical events by packaging them maybe in a fictional way that someone who would not read a non-fiction history book would actually consume. And I, for my part, definitely did some research afterwards because I wanted to know how close the book is to reality, and I learned quite a bit, especially about the slave uprising in Haiti and what happened back then. That was my quick review of the Shadow Histories duology. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope I got you excited to read the book. If you've read it, let me know down in the comments what you thought. Did you like the 2 books? Did you read both of them? Did you maybe just read 1 and still have to read book number 2? Let me know in the comments, and then I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you soon with my next video. Bye!